Art Latornell was born in 1923 to a farm family in St. Vincent Township on the shores of Georgian Bay near Meaford. It was a general mixed farm. He attended a one-room school, which was right on the edge of the farm, I understand, and then went on to Meaford High School. Art was a very keen student, did a lot of reading, kind of a shy, quiet boy. And living out in the country, of course, developed an ability to be a great observer of nature. Only after the war did Art get to go to university, where he attended Ontario Agricultural College in Guelph and graduated in 1950 with a degree in agricultural science. In 1953, Art was recruited to join the conservation branch of the Ontario Department of Planning and Development. This was a very elite, small, avant-garde organization which had been established after World War II by Dr. Richardson to bring about integrated resource management into Ontario. And of course, with the passage of the Conservation Authorities Act, this enabled the authorities to become established through local option. For the next 6 years, he played that role for the department. He was assigned part-time duties in various authorities in Southern Ontario, but I guess mostly concentrated on what was then known as the Etobicoke-Mimico Conservation Authority in what's now the western side of Toronto. In 1959, Art's career as a field officer ended, and he then was hired in the main conservation branch to head the land use section. This involved the preparation of land use surveys that would be then incorporated into the conservation report, which the branch would ultimately issue for each new conservation authority. This involved recruiting each summer a team of crack students who would then go out and carry out field investigations that would be incorporated into the final report, which would be written by the branch.
My connections with Art are several-fold. First, as Art being my first full-time employer in Ontario, while he was in the Conservation Authorities branch and I was hired by Art as a resources manager in training, and then a resources manager in several conservation authorities under Art's, quote, supervision.
Art was involved in encouraging and helping young people throughout his career, certainly in terms of his contact with me, but with many other folks of my age group, and some that are a bit older and some that are younger than I am. He did that over quite a span of time. Art was very much in terms of just a positive, quiet force, guiding more than doing anything, encouraging to look at opportunities, considering ways to in fact expand one's knowledge and one's career. He was very much a leader by example in terms of the way that he went about living his life, and in fact the way that he developed his career over a period of time.
Back in when I met Art, mentoring wasn't, you didn't mention the word mentoring, whereas today people talk about mentoring and they want to have a mentor and there's formal processes for mentoring. Back then, Art just played the role of a mentor, and it just happened. Art was always someone you could go to if you had a question or you wanted to know how to approach a problem. Art was great at having you solve your own problems. Art seldom, if ever, solved your problem for you, but he just gave you the tools and the direction for you to figure out the solution to the problem yourself.
In 1963, Art was then appointed by the branch as the head of field services. What this meant was that Art was responsible for recruiting, training, mentoring all of the field officers who were assigned as the chief operating officers of the conservation authorities. They still worked for the branch, reported to Art, but also had to please everybody out in the authority. Art was held in very high regard as a supervisor. He, first of all, chose very excellent people for this job, and he had a great skill in instilling in them what the feeling for the job should be. He was just a very motivational, wise, insightful individual. Another thing Art did is he broke with tradition. Instead of hiring just Aggies and foresters, with all respect to those fine professions, he actually brought in the first biologists and geographers to be resource managers. He also hired the first female assistant resource managers, and of course today in conservation authorities many of the general managers are female. So Art again was on the cutting edge of all of that.
The legacy there, I think, is that he moved forward that opportunity to, if you had an interest in the environment, whether it was from a 4-H club or Boy Scouts or Junior Naturalists, then the opportunity was there through the Junior Conservation Award program, some camp experiences at CAs or Junior Ranger, that kind of thing. You had the opportunity to get involved. Then you had summer employment. Art mentored many in the resource management managers and training program so that you could start your career following university and then continue on through employment in conservation authorities and in senior levels of the Ontario government.
One of the other great programs that Art developed during this period in the late 60s was the Junior Conservationist Award Program, which was strictly his brainchild. It was designed as an award program for top-notch students in high schools around the province, and there was really only a handful that got selected. And it was designed to be like the Lands and Forests Junior Ranger program, but instead the focus was on the whole watershed, integrated resource management, and the students were put into teams of 7 or 8, then assigned a supervisor who also was hired by Art, and then they would go off and work on a 6-week assignment to a conservation authority that had initially submitted a problem to be solved.
Sure, others have mentioned that that program was sponsored by conservation authorities and started in 1966, but 1971 was the first year that they decided to venture into allowing girls to join the boys group. So I was interviewed, and they thought that I could maybe handle myself with 6 girls in a live-in situation, and they hired me for that position as a group leader.
In 1973, Art Latornell was appointed as the director of the Conservation Authorities branch. And now we're in the new Ministry of Natural Resources, so there's a lot of competition for the dollars. But Art certainly was, I would say, overwhelmingly the people's choice, the choice of the people who worked in the field, the choice of the chairman and members of conservation authorities across the province. He was the unanimous choice to be the director.
He advanced the program, moved the conservation authorities along substantially. There were certainly other individuals like A.S.L. Barnes and some of the write-ups that were completed that were key players in the creation and formation of the Conservation Authorities program initially. But I think Art very much was the one that carried it the extra mile, went in that nearer term to in fact ensure that additional conservation authorities were formed, that some enlargements took place, that in fact the right people were recruited, not just in terms of on the staff side, but more importantly on the political side and the membership side to move the program forward. So I think Art, in his own quiet way, really advanced the yardsticks and moved the program forward over quite a period of time.
In 1976, then Art was moved out by the Ministry of Natural Resources and replaced by others who didn't have such a strong background in conservation, and he became a deputy regional director. So, if you like, this was kind of a fitting culmination for his career. He was moving on into the bigger ministry and worked out of Richmond Hill. he also had a long involved career with what was then known as the Soil Conservation Society of America, held many positions with that organization in the Ontario chapter, and was honored in the late 1970s as the first non-American to be the president of the International Soil Conservation Society of America, and I understand he did an excellent job, and later then was appointed chief of the editorial board for the Journal of Soil and Water Conservation. So Art worked out for the remainder of his career, about 9 years in that field, and unfortunately in around 1986 suffered the first of a series of strokes, which ultimately led to his early death in 1991.
I got a call, I think it was from Brian Howard, saying that Art had left a quite astounding endowment fund, and you wanted a few guys to get together that knew Art and sort of the scene in resource management, and make some suggestions as to how that money should be divided up amongst a number of different causes that would all ultimately lead to encouraging young people to get seriously involved in conservation.
I think I was probably as amazed as many people in terms of the size of the endowment, the estate that in fact Art had left behind, through a pretty simple start in terms of working on a dairy farm, his father's dairy farm up in Meaford, being as actively involved in the Conservation Authority's program. At the end of the day, that isn't something that would have paid significant dollars to him. He made some wise investments. He saw some opportunities in terms of the Fairlawn Sod Company as a quiet investor, a silent partner in all of that, and so he made some very astute moves, as I understood afterwards, because Art would never, in fact, let you know that up front, and none of us really had any impressions of how much Art was able to leave to a great cause through the endowment to the University of Guelph.
I'm sure it came as a surprise to many people. Those who were close to him probably knew, but to those who were simply associates of his in the conservation movement, it was a wonderful, generous gift that he has left, and the fact that it's able to sustain the professional development at the Latornell Conference, lecture series at the university. All of the archives for the Conservation Authority's movement are now stored at the University of Guelph through some support of his. Many have stayed involved, sort of directing how that endowment fund should be used, and so that's a wonderful legacy.
It's just a tremendous legacy to Art, as it will continue on forever, and that's one of the roles of the endowment fund, is to make sure it does go on forever. But the numbers of students, the number of youth that Art has helped through this fund is just amazing. And those individuals would not otherwise have that opportunity, because the university often is short of funds for youth travel and scholarships, and definitely in terms of the funds for training and development. So Arts funds can help students who may want to go to a conference or symposium but can't afford the registration fee, to someone who's doing a PhD and wants to do some travel to another location or country to confirm their research. So I can't say enough about the funds. On average, the funds have provided at least $70,000 a year towards these types of activities, which over time just gives a great opportunity to youth. And again, I can't stress Art's interest in youth enough.